The Senate of Canada is steeped in history. As we celebrate Black History Month, it's important to note that more and more over the years, the Senate has come to reflect this country's many voices and rich diversity. Established at Confederation in 1867, Canada's upper house provides checks and balances for the country's parliamentary system. Senators are appointed by the Governor-General on the advice of a sitting Prime Minister. There are 105 senators who come from all walks of life and represent all 10 provinces and 3 territories. We profile 4 of these senators who've literally changed the face of Canadian politics and Canadian history. The Honorable Donald H. Oliver is a trailblazer. The lawyer, statesman, educator, and entrepreneur was appointed to the Senate in 1990 on the advice of Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. He was in a business meeting when he got the call.
And that's when the Prime Minister said some very, very kind, flattering things about the work I'd done in the community and for people, and that he wanted to reward that work by appointing me to the Senate of Canada. And with that appointment, I became the first black man in the Canadian history to ever be summoned to the Senate, so it was just an enormous experience. And I didn't know what to say. I kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oliver has come a long way from the small farm where he was born in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. His parents were devout Baptists who raised him and his siblings in a strict household that revolved around religion, music, and hard work.
My father was a janitor, and his pay in the 50s was $25 a week for 5 kids and a wife. And it was not a lot of money, you know, even in those days.
He learned the value of education early on. He majored in history at Acadia University, where he graduated with honors. He went on to earn a law degree from Dalhousie and was called to the Bar of Nova Scotia in 1965. He practiced law for nearly 4 decades and was also a part-time law professor.
And one of the decisions that I made to myself is that I want to do something so I can serve the people. And not just black people, but serve Canadians. And so then I got a chance to go to law school, and I said, gee, this will be great, because as a lawyer, you know, with an understanding of the laws, there are probably going to be a lot of ways in which I can help people. And so that's the route that I took.
While a university student, Oliver became active in the Progressive Conservative Party, inspired by Nova Scotia Premier Robert Stanfield, who became a friend and mentor.
We worked together over the next 20 years on a number of projects, and he was a major influence in my becoming politically involved and with a social conscience. Another
career milestone for Oliver is being named Deputy Speaker of the Senate. He's the first African Canadian to hold that post. Another groundbreaking achievement, Oliver spearheaded a study by the Conference Board of Canada in 2005 on barriers to the advancement of visible minorities in the workforce.
The study was done, and that study proved that there are, in fact, systemic racial barriers to the advancement of visible minorities, Aboriginals, and the other 2 target groups in the public service and in the private sector.
Oliver adds that the many contributions that people of color, people of African descent have made in this country have been neglected in the history books and elsewhere, and he says we must each do our part to change that.
We were great builders of this country from Halifax to Victoria, but it's not known by very many people. I personally speak to a number of students in schools across the country, and the sad thing about it is that these students know so little about our history.
Despite his many accomplishments and awards, including 3 honorary doctorates, Oliver is still humble.
Even today, after 22 years, I still pinch myself and say, look, I'm truly blessed to have had this opportunity to serve the people of Canada in this way.
As an African Canadian, as a Jamaican Canadian, to stand in the highest boardroom of the land. There is no feeling like it. I mean, I'm still, every time I walk into the chamber, I'm still in awe.
Senator Don Meredith relives a proud moment when he was first ushered into the Red Chamber. It was in 2010 that he received that unexpected invitation.
I, saw a 613 number come up on my phone, and I said to my client, "Excuse me, I've got to take this call."
He describes his conversation with Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
Says, "Don, it would be an honor to have you come and serve on the Hill with us." So for me, it was really a moving, emotional experience to be able to get that phone call and to be able to see that my community activism was being recognized, and the Prime Minister, in fact, of Canada.
Meredith is a business owner, entrepreneur, and ordained minister. He co-founded and is executive director of the GTA Faith Alliance, an interfaith group committed to finding solutions to youth violence.
I started the movement, co-founded the organization in 2002 with other volunteers and other members of the community, because we were absolutely tired of seeing our young men's lives taken. Presided over several funerals. I've, comforted several families, especially single mothers. And for me, it was a sense of, providing leadership.
The 48-year-old admits a life in politics was initially not on his radar, but the values of community service were.
When I was about 26, I got engaged in terms of just volunteering with, municipal politics, and then I began, sort of more engaged with provincial politics, and then I ran as well in 2008 against the former premier of this province.
Meredith is determined to leave a lasting legacy and says his title means nothing to him unless he's using it for the advancement of society.
For me at this level, being a Canadian senator, I now can influence policy around youth. I'm looking at a national strategy on youth right now.
His years of community work have prepared him to engage with those in leadership roles and challenge the status quo, and he encourages others to follow his path.
I embrace this role. I think there's great opportunities here for other African Canadians to come and serve in this capacity. It's a sad thing, though, that is only in the 145-year history of this country, there's only been 4 of us. The late Calvin Ruck, Senator Ann Cools, and Senator Don Oliver, and then myself.
Meredith says more has to be done to recognize the contributions and achievements of people of African descent, not just during Black History Month, but all year round.
We have a right as Canadians, irrespective of our skin tone, we have a right to be here. We are Canadians. And that's, for me, very critical, that that message gets out, especially to our youth. We need to find ways to engage, we need to find ways to encourage, and we need to find ways to empower our youth. And those are my 3 E's. And clearly, I want to see that resonate across this country.
Senator Meredith is encouraging youth, especially in the Black and Aboriginal communities, to call his office to be hosted by him on Parliament Hill. He's ready to create a dialogue and mentor the next generation of leaders.
My appointment was not lobbied for, so it was a surprise to many.
Senator Ann C. Cools recalls that life-changing moment in 1984 when she was summoned to the Senate upon the recommendation of Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau.
When he called to inform me that he wanted to invite me to join the Senate, I felt as well in awe, but at the same time humbled.
Cools not only made history as the first Black senator in Canada, but also earned the distinction of being the first Black female senator in North America. Beyond her many awards and accolades, she's been focused on fulfilling her life's work, making a difference in people's lives.
All that mattered was the fact that I was to do well, and it was my bounden duty to work hard on behalf of the people of Canada.
Her family immigrated to Canada in 1957 when she was 13 and settled in Montreal. She studied sociology and psychology at McGill University, where she earned her degree. Influenced by the civil rights movement of the 60s to fight against racism and inequality, Cools became involved in youth activism.
I have always been deeply bothered and pained, anguished about people's cruelty to each other.
In 1974, Cools moved to Toronto, where she founded one of the first shelters for abused women in Canada, Women in Transition, Inc. A few years later, she ran as a Liberal candidate in the Toronto riding of Rosedale. An outspoken pioneer on domestic and family violence issues, she played a pivotal role in the creation of the special Senate House of Commons Joint Committee on Child Custody and Access After Divorce. A former social worker, she has been a staunch advocate for fathers.
And I have always had a preoccupation with man's inhumanity to man within intimate relations, within family relationships. And I set out to do something about that.
Although she now has no party affiliation and has faced criticism over the years for some controversial views, she stands by her work.
There's a lot of my work that has been on the floor of the Senate around very, some would think, cryptic, arcane, difficult parliamentary questions. But the bulk of my public work has been on these deeply personal areas in people's life.
Currently the longest-serving member of the Senate, Cools reflects on how she'd like her life's work to be remembered.
That I did the best I could. And when I encountered opposition and adversity, I sought to face it, confront it, and defeat it using reasoned argument and rational debate.
Grateful for the support she's received from Canadians of all backgrounds, Senator Cools says that if she can reach this pinnacle in her career, others can too, because energy and effort are raceless. The late Senator Calvin Ruck was a tireless advocate for black Nova Scotians. The Sydney native, who was named to the Senate in 1998 on the advice of Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, became the third African Canadian ever appointed to the Senate. The son of immigrants from Barbados, he was deeply affected by the racism and inequality his family and other blacks faced on a daily basis. He devoted his life to changing that. He challenged businesses like barbershops that wouldn't cater to black customers by not leaving their shops until he was served. He worked as a CN rail porter, laborer, and janitor years before he earned a diploma in social work from Dalhousie University. He served on the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission and also held a variety of positions with the Black Cultural Society and Nova Scotia Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Senator Donald Oliver remembers his former colleague.
Yes, I have had many occasions to work with and spend time with the late Calvin Ruck, who became a senator, and he was a strong human rights advocate, and he did a lot of work in human rights.
A strong believer in education, he later researched and wrote a book about an all-but-forgotten all-black military unit called the No. 2 Construction Battalion, which served overseas during the First World War. Senator Ruck served in the Senate until 2000, when he reached the mandatory retirement age of 75. He died 4 years later. But the impact he had in breaking down barriers and fighting for racial equality lives on.